Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Skymaster F18 assembly build video series. If this is your first time finding the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below so you do not miss any content that I release. And if this is the 10th time you've been here or more, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. It helps to support the channel, and list any comments down below. Alright guys, in the last video we started to get the tanks installed in the saddle tanks and the rear part of the fuselage. In this video we're going to focus on finishing that tank installation, and then we are going to get the wiring kind of run to the front, and then we can get the main tank installed as well too. So that's going to be the primary focus of this video. Perhaps we might join the fuselage halves, or it might be in the next video. So without further ado, let's hop in. Alright guys, so I got all the pieces cut and everything is glued right now, but it hasn't set, so we have to be very careful. Don't blow on anything or it might shift. But anyways, so the way that I got this set up is we've got a block underneath this plate on the front, a block underneath the plate on the back, and then the bend piece of plywood that can unbolt and be taken out. So the blocks are glued to the tank and also to that former that the gear mounts to. On both sides we have the same setup. So if we ever have to get these tanks out, all we have to do is unscrew those screws, pull the plates out, and I did use silicone up top here. That was my initial plan all the way along. Now I love to use silicone to install tanks as long as you can get at it. So the way you, if you ever have to take these tanks out, you can use fishing line. We just feed it down below there and you just pull the fishing line through and it easily cuts through the silicone. Or you can use safety wire as well too, whatever you have. In this case, we could probably use an X-Acto knife and just cut that out as well too. So it's going to be a very, very solid tank mounting setup. So basically we need to let that cure overnight. And once that's cured, we can continue moving on with the rest of the progress. All right, guys, it is the next day, and the silicone's cured, the high sol's cured, and this is extremely solid. So absolutely awesome. Still a little bit of play in the silicone. It's not 100% cured yet, but yeah, really, really well done. Nice and solid. So basically, as I was explaining yesterday, so now if you want to take these tanks out, you just undo those two screws, and the tab joining the tanks to the airframe is removable, and that's it. So that's awesome. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on the gear plate. The equipment plate. All right, guys, so I have the plate pretty much figured out here. This is just from it's actually a piece of extra ply from a Carf Ultra Flash kit, and it's kind of medium ply, so it's not aircraft ply, which is good because we don't need a lot of weight in this area. So what I've done here is figured out the kind of size I want, and then I've made these spacers, which I've notched out the ply, and they fit in the side there. So right now the spacers are too long. So what I can do is I need to get this all assembled, but I'm just showing you guys what it's going to look like. So that's kind of my thinking behind it all. And if I want to drop it down, I can actually just groove out these spacers to match the profile of the carbon rod, and it'll provide support from the rod or on the rod as well too. So there will be two blocks mounted on the tanks that this will screw into, so it should be nice and solid. This just gives it a little bit extra support. Now we do have this this faux carbon, which is just plastic. I ordered a sheet of this, I think, from DreamWorks quite a while ago, and this is all that I've got left, but works really well. And I found the easiest way to glue this stuff together is using spray glue. So I've got a section here that's pretty much the right size, and I always glue these things together and get it nice and stuck, and then I cut it out on my my scroll saw. So I'm gonna glue these pieces together, and that'll be the next step, and I'll show you guys what I'm doing with that. Alright guys, I've got a couple different types of spray adhesive. This stuff works really well. If you're in Canada, it's available from Canadian Tire. I also have a bottle of 3M number 77 adhesive right up there, but all this stuff's in the way, so I don't want to go up there and get it. This stuff works good anyways. So basically what you want to do is you want to put multiple coats on this. It's almost like contact cement. So you don't spray it and then stick them together. You got to let it set up. So I'm going to shake this really well, and then you put a coat on one direction, okay? And then we're going to put 3 coats on. The next one we're going to spray it across, so 90 degrees to the original, and they'll put a third on like that. So we wait about 5 minutes in between coats, and then we let it dry so it's tacky or just sticky, but it doesn't come off on your finger. When that's set up, then we'll stick it together. So I'm going to put those on and watch paint dry. All right, guys, so that's 3 layers of adhesive on there. You can see that it's not necessarily dry to the touch, but it's not super sticky. So when it touches the other side of adhesive, it sticks no problem. So what we'll do is we'll just flip this over, get her kind of lined up. And now this piece is cut too big, so we've got some wiggle room there. There we go. So now all we need to do is basically give that a good push, flatten it all out, and then I'll put some weight on it for a little bit. What I like to do with this is just take, because this has the protective cover on it, so I'll just take this, go over the edge of the workbench a couple times. Do the other side. So this adhesive, I mean, it's important, but it's not super important. Once we start bolting things to this, it holds it together as well too, but makes for a nice finished product. So now what I'm going to do is let that dry a little bit, and then I just take this on my scroll saw and just trim off all the pieces. Now where I've got the overhangs there for the tabs, I'm going to leave that piece I'm going to leave that piece flat like that, so it covers up the edge of the tab. But we'll end up using epoxy or high sol to glue those pieces in, and the tab on that side as well. And but we just clean this all up around the edges to match the profile of the wood. All right, guys, so there is the finished location for the plate. So I did this a lot like I did those spacers down there. So I used 5-minute high sol on the little uprights and put a little support in there as well too. So those I'm going to keep at that current length. And then I screwed the glue tabs on already, and what I need to do is sand this area on the tanks, and then we will install some high sol, of course, and we will glue that plate on. So take those 2 screws off and it's removable, and I think that's going to work out really well. Now the one thing with this is it does allow us to run the vent and fuel lines to this area. We'll also have the smoke tubes coming underneath with the wiring and over to this area. And so I wanted to leave it off the intake structure enough so we'd have some decent clearance there to work with everything. So then if we have to run anything through the space or the gap in the tanks there, we got lots of room. So that's basically what's going to happen. I'm going to glue those on, but just to show you what we've actually got to put on this this tray. Okay, so this definitely is not a final depiction of how things are going to work, but I think this is everything we need to mount on this tray. So we've got the 2 plugins for the GSUs for the turbines. So we've got one on one side, one on the other side. Now my thinking with that is you're starting the turbines, you want to have one plugged in. It's going to sit right here on this tank. The other one's going to sit on that tank. So that's why we need the plugins on both sides, right? So those are going to be these guys here, have the servo plug-in, and that's going to work out well. We've got, each engine has its own shut-off valve, right? So we've got one for one engine, one for the other engine. We're going to have a smoke on-off, and that's going to split after the valve here, and that's going to go to each side. Then we've got the soft switch for the 16 BPX JR unit. Okay, so that's just the soft on-off switch. And then we've got our air fill valve, which is a BVM unit, and then a standard gauge. So just keep in mind we've only got one air fill line because we're only using one system. The brake's going to run off of the down gear line, which works really well. So I'm pretty much sure that's all that we need to put on there. Of course, there's lots of room to put other stuff on there, but it should be a nice, clean look, and I think it's going to work out really well. So I'm going to get some high-sol installed on these things, and we'll get this thing put in the plane, and that'll be everything for tonight, and we'll continue on tomorrow with this project. All right, guys, so there's the plate installed. I just glued it in, so it's wet. But I just wanted to show you a couple things here. So obviously I don't want to get any glue on the tray, so just line that with tape. And you can see in an area like that, it's quite important because the glue squishes up, and we would have ended up gluing the tray to the tank as well. Anyways, guys, that's that. We're going to let that cure overnight, and we will see you tomorrow. All right, guys, it is the next day, and this is all cured. I've undone the screws, and that's it. So everything worked out really, really well. The blocks are nice and firm. They've only been on there for about 8 hours, so they're not 100% cured yet, but my tape worked well, prevented the board from sticking to the tanks. So next thing to do is kind of plan and actually finalize the installation of all the startup equipment on here, and then start to get things kind of plumbed with the main tank and getting the wires forward. So I'm going to work on getting this finalized, and I'll show you guys what I come up with. All right, guys, the main board is done. So everything's labeled. Pretty straightforward, though, as I mentioned. So we've got the GSU plugs on each side, so we can put the GSUs right here while you're starting up, or on top of the wing, of course, as well, too. We've got fuel, and we've got the smoke valve, the main on and off power, which is just a soft switch. And then we've got our air fill and air gauge. So everything's been labeled. That needs to be. Obviously the air is pretty straightforward. Shout out to Joe for 3D printing some of these little bits that we're going to be using on this plane. So these valve holders, which are awesome. Just for size, I wanted to use the aluminum ones on the fuel and one of those on the smoke. Also differentiates them as well too. So thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. We'll have a bunch more little tidbits that we'll be using on the build. There's a couple little fuel holders there, which are super nice and neat and just look great. So anyways, guys, that's the main system. So now that that's done, we can start plumbing stuff. So basically the way I have this set up was the smoke line comes through that hole and loops back to the T, and then splits out to each engine. The fuel lines are going to be plugged into right there, and just to keep things nice and simple, they're just going to have a straight run to the engine, so to the different fuel plugs on the engine. I mean, we could loop those around and come out the side, but it's going to be nice to have just a straight shot to the engine. So anyways, that's the plan for the fuel. And that's it. So I'm happy with the way this turned out. I think it looks great. Hopefully you guys think so as well too. But nice and simple and compact, and everything's on there, and no interference with the lid as it goes on. So now what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to start to plumb everything forward and kind of backwards all at the same time. And we'll get kind of everything set up. And after that, we'll be ready to join the fuselage. So I'll show you guys as this progresses here. All right, guys, things have been cleaned up a little bit here. We still have the tray to put in place, but we've got our 3 lines here, our 3 Festo lines. This is 2 for fuel, 1 for smoke. Those go to the front. What I'm going to do before I finish attaching anything here is I'm going to fill this tank system completely, and just to check and make sure that it's all good. But if you're wondering what the wiring looks like in a plane like this, that's the wires that come from the back end, and of course all the airlines as well too. So, but that's the whole bundle. Probably looks quite confusing and like a rat's nest, but it's all very organized and it makes sense. So, also bolted the tank in. So just drilled a hole here, drilled a hole there. And now that hole is oversized, so the screw actually fits through that hole no problem. And then I drilled a smaller hole into the block in the back and got that fastened. That tank is extremely solid and works really well. So we've got foam underneath the tank. I think most of the weight's being supported by those blocks, but when I did do the tank up, I actually pushed the tank down quite a bit as well. And we needed to keep the tank off the bottom of the aircraft because we've got 2 blind nuts on the bottom there for the centerline tank, which will go on there as well. So I'm going to fill this fuel system, and just plug one side and hook up my fuel pump to the other side, fill the entire thing up, and see what happens. All right, guys, so everything is full. The tank's filled nicely and started to come out the vent line. So that works good. Now we're going to drain it all and make sure that every last drop drains out. All right, guys, so the back end of this aircraft is done. The plate's in place and everything is good. I think it looks awesome. Turned out very well. Have a couple little cable holders to do in this area and a couple little bits of cleanup and touch up, you know, mounting these lines and stuff like that. But the gist of it in the back end of the aircraft is pretty much done. And happy with the way everything turned out. So we're pretty much ready to join the front half of the fuselage. Woohoo! Which is exciting. And that progresses us to the front portion of this airplane. All right, guys, that's the end of this this episode. In the next episode, we will be joining the fuselage halves together and starting to work on the front portion of the aircraft, which is exciting. So thank you so much for tuning in, guys. If you have any questions, make sure you list them down below. If you have any comments, list them down below. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. And last thing, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button down below. And we do appreciate it. It helps to support the channel. So thanks so much for tuning into the Skymaster F-18 build series video. We'll see you in the next one.